My name is Villetta Hawley Albert. I am the oldest surviving member of the Herbert and Eugenia Hawley family. All of my brothers, Leslie, Lyle and Clayton, passed away in the 1950s. This is a letter I wrote to my niece, Rita Marie, in February 1963. The letter summarizes information about our family history that I had saved over the years. My dear Rita has taken an interest in our shared family ancestry, and it is my hope that she carries my work forward for future generations. In brief, may I say that my brothers and I are descendants of very proud and well-recognized families on both sides of the family. Our mother's people were teachers, and her father, Archibald McDuff Ford, was the county superintendent of schools in Dane County. Her uncle, David Ford, pictured here, was a member of the Wisconsin state legislature for many, many years until his retirement. The area near Waunakee was known as Fordville, named for the Ford brothers, who came from Dunfermline, Scotland as young boys and settled there after growing up in Massachusetts. They each bought a farm and cleared the land of its timber before they could farm it. Grandfather Archibald Ford was lame before he was 8 years old, this by a dislocated hip joint from disobeying his father and jumping out of a window. He had been warned not to, so he hit himself until it was too swollen for the doctor of that early day to put it in place. So, all his life he suffered from it and wore a high cork sole on that one shoe and used a cane. Grandmother Ford, the former Harriet Tubbs, was of English, Pennsylvania Dutch and Yankee parentage. Her mother used to say the blood of Pocahontas flowed in her veins. My grandma Ford was teaching school at 16 years of age, and in that way grandfather Ford met her when he visited her home to take her to a school in Dane County. She was a very progressive teacher and way ahead of her times in her original methods of teaching. Ella Wheeler Wilcox, pictured here, the poetess and writer, was an early pupil of hers when my grandmother boarded in the Wheeler home. Grandma Ford's father and brother both died during the War of the Rebellion. Her brother, Daniel Tubbs, as a very young soldier, was hospitalized with the measles in the South, and his father, Ezra, went down to see him but was too late, then he too grieved so for his son, and then he sickened and died too. This is an image of the roster for the unit in which he volunteered. Great-grandmother Tubbs, Anna Staton Stone, wrote many poems, one about her daughter who died of tuberculosis, her soldier son's death, and husband's too. She lived in the house where I was born, but died before I was able to remember her. My grandparents Archibald and Harriet had 11 children, but only 7 survived to adulthood. They are Albert, Eugenia, Amelia, Edgar, Harriet, Isabel, and Archie. Albert, a real estate and insurance agent in Waunakee, wore a wooden leg from the knee down. He had a habit of hanging a leg out of the buggy on the step, and his team ran away when he was visiting his sister, Amelia Stewart, out at Wahpeton, in the Dakotas. His foot got caught in the wheel and it was twisted off at the knee. He became a diabetic in his old age and in spite of it lived to be 75. Edgar became a doctor, much beloved and trusted in the area of Cambria, Wisconsin. Then he built a big sanitarium at Trout Lake, Michigan. He was a huge man, tall, broad-shouldered, red-headed, at least 300 pounds. He died at 47 years old. Uncle Edgar married my father's, Herbert, beautiful second oldest sister, Cornelia Hawley, in 1890. Eugenia, your grandma Jean, was the oldest girl in the family. She went to high school for 2 years and taught school for 10 years. There at Mazomanie, she met my father, Herbert, when he came home from Nebraska, where he had gone to stay with his older brother, Ernest. Harriet, Aunt Hattie, was the next sister to Amelia. Both of them attended high school for 2 years. They both taught school, Aunt Hattie for 7 years. But Amelia hated teaching, so she did dressmaking until her marriage to Lathrop Stewart. Aunt Hattie married Hugh Buchanan, who worked for her father, Archibald, on the home farm. Here is a picture of the 4 Ford sisters taken by my husband, Arthur, in 1933. Archie, named after his father, and was my mother's youngest brother. He also became a doctor after graduating medical school in Milwaukee, this when I was about 12 years old. He was a prince of a man and was the family doctor in Roberts, Wisconsin for nearly 50 years. Isabel, the one born before Uncle Archie, and now living in Long Beach, California. A widow for several years, and now almost 91. She was a sickly child and overprotected as our parents had lost so many children, they feared too much that she might not live. She became a dressmaker and used to do much sewing for the governor's wives when she had a shop in Madison for years. She moved to Detroit, Michigan, and while there met and at 50 years old married Edward Pierce. Of course, they had no children. We were all great admirers of our Aunt Belle, as we always called her. Our father's family on his mother's side were also Fords, but came from England, and they could find no trace of a relationship between our two families before our mother, Eugenia, and father, Herbert, were married. Grandma Hawley, Mary Ford, had many Methodist ministers among her family, and also a niece who was a deaconess. Grandma Hawley died of childbed fever when her youngest son was born. Here is a photo of Herbert's parents, Samuel and Mary Hawley. Samuel Hawley, my grandfather, was a gardener in England, and a farmer in Barry Township, and kept together the young ones who remained at home after his wife's death. Uncle Ernest was already married and in Nebraska on a claim. Our dad went out there in April 1888, as I have said before. Viola, Nellie and Fred attended school where my mother taught. They enthusiastically introduced Herbert to our mom upon his return from Nebraska in December 1888. And, of course, you know the rest of the story. I remember the weddings of Viola, Asa, Nellie and Fred. Aunt Nellie was the last as she kept house for grandfather. He lived around with his children and at 72 died of a coronary attack at Aunt Viola's in Sauk City, Wisconsin in June 1903. Here is a wedding picture of Viola and Louis from June 1897. There were singing masters, dentists and preachers among my father's cousins and uncles. Dr. Will Gillette, the dentist, you may have met in Madison. Here is a photo from one of our many family reunions over the years. Well, Rita, this letter grew long, but I will try charting the relatives in more concrete form some of these days, and will give cousins' names and occupations also. Here is a copy of my ancestry chart. I hope this helps you as you research and navigate our family history. Well, that's all for now. I have fond memories of all of my nieces and nephews, but you should know, you were always my most favorite. I always enjoyed your many visits to our home in Hancock and our correspondence over the past several years.